Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Michelle and today I want to talk about the things that I knit this fall. So I'll start this off by saying this fall I definitely was not as productive with my knitting as I was in the summer. In the summer I was definitely going really crazy with knitting and I think I knit like a dozen different garments and accessories. This fall was definitely a little bit slower. It's a combination of me being more busy with work this fall, also going on a pretty long vacation, and also just a lot of the things I wanted to knit this fall take a lot longer than summer garments that are just like tank tops and t-shirts. So if you missed it, at the end of summer I did like a fall knitting plans video where I talked about I think like 8 different patterns and projects I wanted to work on during the fall. So today you'll see some of those projects, but also I just didn't get around to a lot of those projects. That's totally okay. Some of them will be moved to the winter, some of them are current works in progress, and maybe plans have changed and I decided not to make some of them. So first let's start with something that I finished and that I'm actually wearing right now. And here it is. This is the oversized seasons cardigan by Ozetta. I had just started this in the last video and now it's done. So the entire cardigan is knit in half fisherman's rib. So the entire thing is covered with this really beautiful squishy stitch that I think is just so nice. I have to say this cardigan was not the most fun to knit because it's in this all over half fisherman's rib pattern. It definitely took a little bit more paying attention to than just knitting plain stockinette, but I will say the one good thing about it, rather than knitting a stockinette cardigan where you would have to purl a lot, is that for a lot of the body on every other row, instead of purling, you just knit the entire row. So it really minimizes the amount of purling you have to do versus knitting a more plain cardigan. So that's definitely a bonus, and I just think it turned out so squishy and comfortable, and it looks very cozy and lived in. The yarn that I used was from Knit Picks, and it's a 100% alpaca yarn in kind of like a worsted Aran weight. It's kind of in like this tan color that I think is very nice and neutral and basic, so I will be able to wear this pretty much all the time. It's also super warm since it's alpaca. I have pretty sensitive skin though, and I do find that even though this is really soft, it's still just a tiny bit prickly for me. It's not unbearable. I was hoping that I would do better with alpaca than wool, and I'm just not completely sure if that's the case. Like I said, it's not unbearable. I can still wear it. I'm actually wearing just a tank top underneath. This is my camisole number 2, I believe it is, from My Favorite Things. So this is also something that I knit this summer, and obviously it doesn't have any sleeves, so I'm just wearing this cardigan over my bare skin on my arms, and I'm okay with it there. Like, I can feel it a little bit, but it's not too bad. So yeah, that is my finished cardigan, and I think overall it turned out really nicely, but there were a few things that I learned along the way. The first is that the bottom button of a cardigan, I didn't realize, has to go like right on like the hem of the cardigan. So if you can see here, I'll angle you down for a second. At the very bottom of this cardigan, I put this button over here, and then I proceeded to knit the ribbing for the hem. I was just like a little bit confused by the instructions, and I didn't realize that the buttonhole is actually supposed to go in the bottom hem like that. So when I wear this, it kind of like splits open a little bit because the button is not all the way at the bottom. So that's completely my mistake. I just didn't really realize that the button was supposed to go here. I just never really paid attention to that part of cardigans before. So yeah, that was my mistake. The other thing is, I don't know if you can see, but the button band is a little bit like wrinkly. You can see that it kind of looks like the button band has more fabric than the actual body of the cardigan. And I think that this is because the button band is knit along with the cardigan, just on like different needles. So you're knitting both of them at the same time, so you end up with the same number of rows for the button band as you do for the body of the cardigan. And I was watching some videos on Andrea Mowry's channel where she answers questions, and it seems like other people tend to have this problem a lot with cardigans, and one thing she suggested is that it's better to knit a pattern where the button band is picked up afterwards so that you can pick up fewer stitches and so that the actual button band is shorter than the body of your cardigan so that it doesn't end up sagging like mine is doing. So if I was to wear my cardigan open, the button bands would just like be way droopier than the rest of the cardigan. So that's something I didn't realize before I went into this pattern, and in the future I think I will choose patterns where the button band is picked up and knitted afterwards so that I can kind of adjust it, and if the button band doesn't turn out the way I want it, I can always just redo that part of the pattern at the very end without having to rip out your entire cardigan and redo the whole thing. So that's definitely something that I learned from this pattern. But overall, I'm very happy with it. It is the first cardigan I've ever knitted, and I think it turned out pretty well. The second thing that I knit this fall is a sweater that I knit for my husband, and this pattern is called the Dead of Night Pullover, and this is what it looks like. You can see it has this beautiful color work of like these skulls at the top, and then there is more color work at the bottom. I think that this sweater turned out so cool. It is definitely like a statement piece, very unique, and this is actually my first color work sweater, so I'm really thrilled with how it came out. I think from far away it's just like so striking. I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. There are like a couple issues that I'll address later on, but first let me talk about the yarn that I used. I used 2 yarns from Holskarn from their Coast line, which is 55% merino lamb's wool and 45% cotton. So I chose this one because I was worried that if I chose a 100% wool, it would be a little bit too itchy, but I did want a little bit of wool content. So I thought that if I chose something that was 50% wool, 50% cotton, it would be a lot softer. And I definitely do think that this yarn is really soft. Like if I put it against my neck, it doesn't really seem itchy at all to me. So this is definitely a yarn that I would repurchase for myself, because I think that even with my sensitive skin, it is very much tolerable even against like my neck, which is probably the most sensitive part of my body to itchiness. So the Holskarn Coast is like a fingering weight yarn, so I doubled it in order to get to like the sport DK weight that I needed. So it was a little bit annoying when I was doing these color work sections because I was working from 4 balls of yarn because I had 2 for each color. So that was a little bit finicky, but I think it was totally worth it, and I love the end effect of this. Overall, I think it's a success. There are just a couple of things that either I wish I would have done differently or that I will go in later on once I've had a little bit time away from this project. I'm probably going to go back and fix them. So the first thing, which I probably won't fix because I'm not really sure how to, is that the actual neckband I think is too wide. It kind of like stretched out as my husband has worn it. So it's pretty wide and you can usually see the shirt he's wearing underneath. I don't really know if he minds so much, but I think it would be better if it was just a little bit more snug against his neck, like a crew neck. But I'm not really sure how to fix that since the collar was the first thing that I worked on and not picked up at the end. I'm not sure how I would take that out and redo it. And it is a folded over neckline as well. I'm not sure if that makes a difference. But yeah, that's one thing I wish it was a little bit more like tight. And I'm not sure if it's just because of the yarn I used. It might be because the other issue I have is actually with the hem of the sweater. So at the bottom of the sweater, you might be able to see even from here, it's kind of like wavy at the hem instead of being cinched in. So I had originally done the hem of the sweater as the pattern called for. I think it was like 2 needle sizes smaller than the body, and it was just like so completely flared out. So I pulled it out and I went down an additional needle size, and that definitely helped, but I still feel like the hem just like flares out a little bit, and especially when my husband is wearing it, it like looks kind of weird. I also think that he needs a little bit more length than I gave him, so I think I need to add like another inch or 2 of this stockinette section before I go into the hem. So yeah, that part of the sweater I'm not really that happy with. He still wears it, but I think it would be better if I went back and like kind of fixed those few things. I just need to wait a little bit because I was so fed up from doing this bottom section since I did have to rip it out that first time, and I had also done a tubular bind off for like this entire like 300 or whatever stitches. So after doing that, I didn't really feel like immediately ripping it out and redoing it, but maybe in a month or so I will go back and fix that so that it is perfect and that he'll wear it and be happy all the time. But overall, I just think this is such a cool pattern. If I can fix those few things, I think it's just gonna be like something that he can keep forever. And I do think that those few issues that I had were more because of the yarn and not because of the pattern. I think that I had heard somewhere that the whole skein yarn does tend to be like a little floppier for hems. I'm not really sure why, but yeah, that's something to keep in mind for my future projects. Here's one last look at it. I think it's so cool. I was working on this like during Halloween and was hoping that I would have it done in time, but didn't quite make it. But I think that's fine. My husband will wear this year round because he really loves skulls. And the last finished object I want to talk about is a pair of socks. These ones I also made for my husband. He had seen a pair of hand knit socks that I made for myself and he just really liked them. He kind of liked the look of them and also the yarn that I used. So we went to the yarn shop and he picked out his own color combination of the same yarn and I knit him a pair so that we could have matching socks. So here's the pair that I knit for him, and the yarn that I used for this is from Retrosaria Rosa Pomar, and it's the Mondim yarn, which is a 100% non-superwash sock yarn. And the colorway he picked is kind of like this black and white speckly kind of yarn. I think it has such a beautiful effect in socks, and he picked this colorway because the socks I had made for myself, which I'm wearing right now, is this like kind of speckly red and white one. So he wanted the black and white one. So now we kind of have like matching socks, which is really cute. I really love this Mondim yarn. It's super warm when knit into socks since it's 100% wool, and it's like not particularly soft but also not itchy. It just feels like a really nice, sturdy, thick sock. I also think it's like slightly thicker than other sock yarns that I've used, so you get like a really nice dense fabric. So yeah, that's his pair of socks, and I'm definitely going to be making more socks with this yarn. I think it's one of my favorite sock yarns that I've used in the past. Some people say it doesn't like last super long. I've been wearing mine for a couple of months, mostly inside the house, but also I've worn them out and I haven't noticed any like holes or anything developing. So yeah, for now I'm gonna keep knitting with these unless I find one day that they are wearing out super fast. But yeah, I just love how the colors knit up, and it's kind of fun as you're knitting it because it's fun to see like the different variations in the yarn as you're knitting, like if you're gonna get a light spot or a dark spot, and I just think that they're really pretty. So I just do a plain vanilla sock with 2x2 ribbing at the top, and then I do a heel flap, I think it's called, and gusset. I don't like short row heels, so I do these heels. I think that they fit a little bit better, and then I do a rounded toe instead of a wedge toe because I don't like how I feel like I can never get my Kitchener stitch to be really tight against the toes if I do a wedge toe. I prefer to do a rounded toe where I can really cinch in the tips and get a really nice tight closing so that our toes don't poke through. And the basic pattern that I follow is from Summerly Designs, but I have made a few changes. So the ribbing I do differently, and I do the rounded toe instead of the wedge toe, but that's a free pattern that you can try out if you want to try out a sock pattern. It's now a few days later. I realized right after filming the video that I completely forgot two finished objects that I made kind of earlier in the fall, and they're very summery knits, so I think in my mind I completely forgot about them because they're not really like fall knits, they're not really like sweaters or anything like that, and they're very summery knits because I actually knit these for my trip to Hawaii that was in November. So let me go through the two knits that I forgot about. So here's the first one. This pattern is called Look at My Holes from James N. Watt, and it's sort of like a fishnet type top. Not quite as thin as fishnet, but definitely has like these big holes that are pretty much see-through, so I usually wear like a bralette under this, and I knit this for my Hawaii trip because I thought it would be great as a beach cover-up, and it was like perfect to throw over a bathing suit to give just a little bit more coverage but not being like a full t-shirt. So I think for that purpose it was really great. I'm not really sure how this fits in to like my normal everyday wardrobe. I'm not sure if I'll be wearing this very much, but then again, it is like pretty cold right now and I'm not thinking of wearing anything this summery at the moment, but maybe when next summer comes around and it's really hot, I'll pull this out a little bit more. So yeah, I think it's great to wear over bathing suits or a bralette, and I knit this in a 100% cotton yarn, and there are two colors here just because I ran out of yarn, but this darker color, which is kind of like it kind of reminds me of like buckwheat noodles, kind of like a gray brown color. I actually dyed that myself using Rudbeckia flowers, which are Black-Eyed Susans. So it's a naturally dyed yarn, and I was holding it double because it's a fingering weight yarn, and I only had one skein. So I ran out of yarn, and I had some of this white cotton in my scrap stash that's from Sadness Garn that I used for a t-shirt in the summer. So I just used the white yarn to create the cuffs and the hems. So I think the contrast makes for a pretty interesting look. It's a pretty cropped top because, like I said, I ran out of yarn. So I probably would have liked it to be just a little bit longer. And I definitely did mess up with like the number of holes, I think, at some points. You can't really tell. But yeah, I'm not a very like detail-oriented person. So whenever I knit, I do tend to make a lot of mistakes and I kind of just like live with it. I'm definitely not a perfectionist. So considering all that, I think it turned out pretty well. I'm not gonna show it worn right now just because it's so cold today and I really just don't feel like putting on just a bralette. So yeah, that's the first one. And then the second knit that I have here, it's kind of like a t-shirt cardigan. This is what it looks like open, and I have some pictures of me wearing this in Hawaii. And this one was really fun to knit because I actually based it off of a free pattern that I found. It's the ballerina wrap top. I forget who it's by, but I'll write it on the screen. And in her version, the front pieces are like basically two triangles that go across the front of your body and they wrap together like a ballerina top. So I followed the basic pattern, and the only thing that I did differently was that once I got up to like this point, when it got to the point where like it was right here where I thought that it would be a good place to tie it, I stopped any of the increases because originally you would just keep going like this way. So I just stopped the increases and I just went straight down back and forth. And then later on I went and attached this I-cord to be the tie at the front of the cardigan. And that worked out really well. I at first was a little nervous about like modifying a pattern, but I think it turned out great. It was exactly how I imagined it. The only thing with this top is that I had to make so much I-cord for this knitting project because not only do I have the I-cord strings, but the entire edge of this cardigan, which is all along the bottom, all along the sides, and across like the back neck, it is all I-cord edging that you like pick up and knit afterwards, and it just took so long. I could not imagine if I had done the original pattern where you're making even more I-cord to like wrap around your entire body basically twice. It would have driven me crazy. So yeah, definitely a lot of I-cord in this pattern, but other than that, I think it came out really great. This is definitely a very wearable piece, I think, for the summer. I actually have like a light blue bralette that's the same exact color, so I can layer them on top of each other, and it kind of looks like a matching set that you would buy in a store. So I think that's really cool. The yarn that I used is from Sadness Garn, and it's their Lena yarn, which is a blend of linen, cotton, and viscose. I think it's mostly cotton. So it's a great summer yarn. It's machine washable, which is really nice because I like having knits that are not very fussy to take care of. I can just throw it in the washing machine with all my other stuff. So I'm really happy with how this knit came out, and I'm excited to wear it once spring and summer rolls around again. So those are the two things that I completely forgot about. So now I'm going to move on to some works in progress that I have going on right now. Since I only had like a handful of finished knits that I made this fall, I thought it would be nice to just show you all the things that I'm working on currently. So yeah, let's continue on with that for the next part of the video. So those are all the finished objects I have to share from this fall. It's actually not that much, but some of the projects were a lot bigger, like my cardigan and my husband's sweater. So those definitely took a little bit of time. I also technically did make another pair of socks with this alpaca sock yarn that I dyed with marigolds. And originally I was going to make my husband's socks out of these, and I did finish one sock, but it just didn't really fit him that well, so I'm gonna completely rip that out and start over. But since I didn't finish that many things, I thought it would be nice to share some of the things that are in progress right now. So the first work in progress to show is a ranunculus sweater, and you can see that I have done the yoke and I'm starting to do one sleeve. The yarn that I'm using is from Knit Picks, and it is their Kotlin yarn, and this is just an undyed version of it, and I believe it's 70% cotton and 30% linen. You can see that beautiful yoke pattern. So I've actually made one ranunculus in the past. I made it this summer, but I'm trying to decide if I'm actually going to rip that out and use the yarn for something else. The version that I made before is a short sleeve version, and it's made out of 100% wool, which like 100% wool in a t-shirt doesn't really make that much sense. At the time, it was the only thing that I could think of that I wanted to knit using my limited quantity of yarn that I had, because I only had two 50-gram balls of fingering weight yarn, and I really wanted to make a garment out of it. So I knitted the ranunculus, but I still ended up running short on yarn. So the sleeves are short because originally I wanted to make 3/4 or full length sleeves, and the body of it is pretty cropped as well. So for being such a short sleeve and cropped sweater, it just doesn't really make sense to have it in 100% wool. So I think I'm gonna rip that one out, and hopefully this version of my ranunculus will be my new ranunculus. I think it's going to be really nice for like spring and early fall, because since it is like cotton and linen, it'll be pretty lightweight, and there's like a lot of airiness to this because the gauge is very open and you have a lot of like eyelets that makes it more breathable. So I think it'll be really nice to layer on top of tank tops or on top of dresses. And I think this new version that I'm working on is going to be much more wearable than my last one. And I also like how this very neutral beige color will go with anything that I want to wear it with, even though it's like not as fun to show and to knit because it's just a very basic color. I find that these are the things that I will wear most often, so I think it will be very practical. I also like that it will be very easy to care for. Being cotton and linen, I can just throw it straight into the washing machine with all of my other clothes and not worry too much about it getting ruined. So that was my first work in progress, and I have a second sweater that I'm working on that is right here. And I am super excited for this one. I am really loving how it's coming out. So the pattern I'm following is called the Dear Duomo by Seunghee Hong, and it's a drop shoulder sweater, and I'm using two different yarns for this. I have a silk mohair from Ritual Dyes. I found 2 balls of this on sale at my local yarn store, and I snagged them up because this is normally yarn that I would not spend money on full price. Personally, I just don't know that I want to spend that much money on yarn, but since I saw it on sale, I grabbed 2 skeins of it. And then to pair with it, I found this 100% fingering alpaca yarn from Knit Picks. It's called Alpaca Cloud, and the colorway is called Anna, and I just thought that they were such a nice color match. This mohair has like little hits of like a brighter cobalt blue and also just a tiny bit of green as well. But mostly it's this like really nice dusty blue color that I absolutely love. And paired together with the alpaca, I think it just is such a beautiful effect. There is some slight variation when those hits of brighter color come in, but overall it's just mostly like that muted blue color. So I think this definitely counts as one of the things that I was planning to make earlier this fall. I had said that I wanted to make like a plain stockinette sweater in either a periwinkle blue color or in like a golden mustard color. So I think this one is close enough to the periwinkle blue that I wanted to make. And this is actually my first time knitting with mohair as well, and it is just such a joy to knit with. It's just like so soft and fuzzy, and it's really, really fun to knit. I'm really hoping that it's not going to be too itchy for me. It feels really soft in my hands, and I think like it's okay against my skin, but we'll just have to see when I finish how it wears over the long run. I think it's pretty soft. I think it will be okay. But yeah, I'm really excited. Between the alpaca and the mohair, it's just like so fuzzy and cozy looking. And finally, the last thing that I am working on right now is the half and half triangles wrap by Pearl Soho, which is a shawl / blanket. And it's basically just like one big square and you have 2 triangles of color. This is how far I've gotten on the first color. And I decided to knit this pattern because I had some leftover yarn from making the Dead of Night sweater for my husband. I had bought 4 balls in the lighter color, and I still had 2 full balls and a little bit more from the 2 balls that I was using. So maybe like 2.5 balls total. And I was trying to figure out what to do with them, and I thought that this would be a perfect way to use those up and to also use some other yarn that I picked up when I picked up the Coast yarn for that sweater. I also wanted to try their super soft yarn, which I know is very popular. This yarn, instead of being 50% wool, 50% cotton, this is 100% wool, a blend of 2 different kinds. And I think it's a little misleading that this one's called super soft because I definitely think that the Coast yarn is softer than this one, since this one is 100% wool. It's a little bit itchier. So I had knit up a little swatch of this, and I had worn it like kind of close to my collarbone for a day to see how it would do for me in terms of itchiness, and I think that it was a little too itchy for me to make a full sweater out of, which was my original plan for this. I think it's such a beautiful like light purple lavender color. It kind of is like a purple color blended with blue that I think is so pretty, but unfortunately, I just don't know that I can wear this next to skin. So my thought was that I was going to use this Coast yarn, which I can wear next to skin, and I can make this half and half triangles wrap. So I figured that if I knit the 2 triangles, I can kind of like fold it in half and wear this part of the scarf against myself, and the itchier purple side can be on the outside, and that way I'll be able to use up some of this yarn and have it not be too itchy. So I'm really excited for this project. It has been really fun to knit because it's just garter stitch, you're just knitting for the entire time. And I've been making good progress on this. I actually only started this like 2 days ago, and I think I've gotten pretty far, especially for this being on small needles with very thin yarn. And it's just been like so fun and like squishy. I just keep like squeezing the fabric that is being knit with it because it's like so soft and cozy. And I'm really excited to wash this too because I noticed that when I knit the sweater in the Coast yarn, after I washed it, the yarn like completely fluffed out and it was just like a completely different fabric from before I washed it. So I'm really excited to see how this like kind of fills out after it's washed and the yarn blooms a little bit. So those are my current projects that I'm working on, and I have a lot more things that I'm planning on knitting as well. In about a week or so, I'll probably share a couple of yarn hauls because I put in some orders from Black Friday, and then hopefully then I can update you if I've made any good progress on these projects, and also talk about some of my knitting and crafting plans for this winter. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.